don't come out here. It's not the place to be. This place is dangerous, and a lot of people don't, realize that. People come out here from all types of different areas, and they get stuck down here. They say, once you go to Kensington, you're not coming back. And it's true.
She's high all day. That's it. It's a never-ending cycle.
This is Daily Homeless News, where tell the stories no one else will. Just a 2-hour drive from the most iconic government building in the United States, right on the land of the American dream. Right now, this city is going through one of the most devastating crises in its history.
On a given day, 400 to 800 people are on the streets here looking for their next high.
Philadelphia, where you'll feel like you're stepping into a scene from a post-apocalyptic show. But these aren't actors. These are real people, and the pain here is real. On the sidewalks, men and women move slowly, quietly, as if weighed down by invisible burdens. Their eyes tell a story of deep struggle, of days spent searching for relief. Many are caught in a dangerous cycle involving powerful substances never meant for humans. Substances originally developed for large animals, now misused in the streets.
That's the best way to describe it. It's like you're literally crawling out of your own skin. When you're dope sick, it's like you don't even want to live. You don't even think you're going to live.
But what you see here is not just about addiction. Could this be the consequence of a system that stopped working long ago? A system that has left far too many people behind? When poverty deepens, mental health is neglected, and housing becomes a privilege instead of a right. No one chooses this life for fun. These people are trying to survive in a world that offers little help and even less compassion. They search for anything that can ease the pain, even for a moment.
People get killed here every day. There's shootings every day. There was just 11 people that got shot. Just bystanders that were just going to the bar, hanging out with their friends, their family. A lot of them got killed.
This is how most homeless people in Philadelphia survive. Because when effort is no longer rewarded fairly, anyone can fall into this desperate situation after just 3 unpaid bills. With the current increasingly serious economic and political instability, this is absolutely no exaggeration. The economic landscape in Philadelphia is a battlefield where the working poor fight a losing war. A report by the Pew Charitable Trusts, published in March 2025, stated that the average rent in 23 counties of Pennsylvania, including Philadelphia, increased by 46% from 2017 to 2023, rising from $1,013 USD to $1,476 USD. A one-bedroom apartment in the city now averages $1,400 a month, while Pennsylvania's minimum wage remains frozen at $7.25 an hour, the same as it was in 2009. For a worker, needs to work approximately 149 hours per week to afford rent under the 30% income rule, leaving nothing for food, healthcare, or emergencies. So where's the American dream? Where is the promise that hard work would be rewarded when rent devours your entire paycheck and even the most basic needs are out of reach? In Philadelphia, poverty clings to entire neighborhoods, with far too many surviving on less than $6,000 a year. While parts of the city shine brighter thanks to gentrification, it comes at a cost. Gentrification, while revitalizing Center City, has displaced longtime residents to areas like Kensington, where poverty and desperation fester like open wound. But the struggle doesn't end with housing, because even having a job no longer guarantees stability. Philadelphia's unemployment rate at 4.2% in 2023 exceeds the national average of 3.6%. The city's economy, once anchored by manufacturing, has shifted to service and tech industries that demand specialized skills or offer only unstable gig jobs with no benefits or security. A delivery driver or retail worker juggling multiple gigs is still one missed paycheck from eviction. The homeless in America, including those in Philadelphia, are not just the chronically unemployed, but also the working poor, people who hustle daily yet can't afford a roof. Economic instability, amplified by the end of COVID-era protections like eviction moratoriums and rental assistance, has left millions teetering on the edge. On top of that, political failures have only added fuel to the fire. The current administration under President Trump, entering its second term in 2025, has proposed budget cuts that threaten programs like the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program and HUD's Continuum of Care, which fund housing and services for the homeless. A 2024 Supreme Court ruling allowing cities to criminalize sleeping in public spaces has emboldened policies that sweep encampments rather than solve homelessness. In Philadelphia, a sanctuary city, tightened immigration policies, such as mass deportations and visa restrictions, have instilled fear in undocumented communities, limiting their access to services and increasing their risk of homelessness. These policies echo historical failures, like the redlining of the mid-20th century, which systematically denied Black and minority families access to homeownership, concentrating poverty in neighborhoods like North Philadelphia. The legacy of these choices lingers with Black Americans, who make up 13% of the U.S. population, accounting for 37% of the homeless in America. Social inequities deepen the crisis. Mental health issues affect 16 to 20% of Philadelphia's homeless population, with conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe depression going untreated due to a woefully underfunded system. In 2022, only 99,491 of 764,780 eligible Philadelphians accessed community behavioral health services, leaving thousands without care. Deinstitutionalization in the 1980s, without adequate community-based support, cast many mentally ill individuals onto the streets. The social safety net, housing subsidies, food assistance, emergency shelters is stretched to the breaking point. Section 8 voucher waitlists stretch years, and shelters are often full, turning away families in need. Systemic racism compounds the problem, with Black and Hispanic communities facing disproportionate barriers in housing, employment, and education. LGBTQ+ youth, foster care alumni, and the formerly incarcerated are also at heightened risk, pushed to the margins by discrimination and lack of support. If this is how the system treats the most vulnerable today, with all its flaws and injustices, then what's left to guarantee any of us will be safe tomorrow? We often assume that homelessness is simply about addiction, but in reality, many homeless individuals have no substance issues, yet they're trapped in the same economic and social traps. For those who do struggle with addiction, the lack of accessible treatment, long wait lists, underfunded rehab programs makes recovery a distant dream. Shelter policies requiring sobriety often leave the addicted with nowhere to turn but encampments where drugs are more accessible than help. To blame addiction alone is to ignore the trauma, poverty, and systemic neglect that drive it. For a small minority, homelessness may seem like a choice, a rejection of restrictive shelter systems or societal norms. But for most, it's a last resort, a consequence of forces beyond their control. Economic volatility, political neglect, and social inequities are both the spark that ignites homelessness and the chains that keep people trapped on the streets. How can we call this a choice when the system offers so few paths to escape? So, from these root causes springs a reality that is both stark and soul-crushing. On any given night in Philadelphia, an estimated 5.191 people are homeless, according to the city's Office of Homeless Services and HUD's 2024 Annual Homeless Assessment Report. But this number, staggering as it is, likely undercounts the true scale, as it misses those couch surfing, doubling up with family, or hiding in plain sight. Nationally, the homeless in America reached 771,480 in January 2024, an 18% spike from the previous year, driven by rising rents, inflation, and migrant inflows. Philadelphia mirrors this trend, with family homelessness surging 39% nationally and similar patterns locally, particularly among minority communities. Black Americans make up 37% of the homeless population, Hispanics 31%, and older adults now account for 20%, a sharp rise from a decade ago. Life on the streets is a daily gauntlet of survival. Kensington, a neighborhood in Philadelphia, has become one of the most deeply troubled areas in the United States, grappling with overwhelming challenges like substance abuse, homelessness, and rising crime. Once known for its working-class stability and small businesses, the area has dramatically declined over the years. Today, many residents describe daily life there as difficult and unsafe, expressing concern over the lack of effective public response and long-term solutions. In Kensington, known as the epicenter of the opioid crisis, encampments sprawl under bridges and along sidewalks, where people face not just cold and hunger, but also violence, disease, and despair. John, a 50-year-old veteran who lost both legs to frostbite after being turned away from a shelter due to curfew restrictions. These are not isolated stories, but the lived experience of thousands, where a lack of ID or a stable address blocks access to jobs, benefits, or even basic hygiene. Diseases like typhus and hepatitis spread in encampments, and the constant threat of police sweeps adds fear to an already precarious existence. A local resident said they no longer feel the area is as good as it was 10 years ago, expressing frustration with the police, who are accused of not intervening when crimes occur, even when witnessing robberies. Looking ahead, the outlook is grim. Without significant intervention, homelessness in Philadelphia is poised to rise. HUD projects continued national increases unless affordable housing expands dramatically. Currently, there's a 7 million unit shortage nationwide. Philadelphia's housing gap mirrors this, with only 38 affordable units available for every 100 extremely low-income households. Economic indicators point to potential recession risks, with unemployment creeping up and inflation eroding purchasing power. The crisis is no longer confined to urban cores like Kensington. It's spreading to suburban and rural areas, touching every demographic. The homeless in America are not a distant other. They are neighbors, co-workers, veterans, and families, one crisis away from the streets. How many more people have to be pushed onto the streets, left to wander, to struggle, to survive without shelter, before we finally admit this isn't just a crisis, but a moral emergency that demands our full attention? "50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, a stark reminder that the line between stability and homelessness is razor thin. Certain groups face heightened risks. Older adults, reliant on fixed pensions, are squeezed by rising rents, with 13 out of every 10,000 seniors homeless in 2023. Low and middle-income workers, even those juggling 2 jobs, are not immune. 74% of low-income renters spend over half their income on rent, leaving no cushion for emergencies. Black and Hispanic families burdened by systemic barriers are overrepresented, with Black individuals comprising 50% of homeless families. LGBTQ+ youth, often rejected by families, and formerly incarcerated individuals who face employment and housing discrimination, are particularly vulnerable. 8% of the latter become homeless within 8 years of release. The specter of economic downturn looms large, with rising unemployment threatening more evictions and pushing even the middle class closer to the edge. This crisis is not just a Philadelphia problem, it's a warning. Homelessness is spreading not only geographically but across social strata, threatening to engulf anyone who stumbles in an unforgiving economy. When did stability become a luxury, and how close are we all to losing it? Given how things are now, can social safety nets truly withstand the pressure, or are they just adding to the confusion and making solutions even more out of reach? Philadelphia and the federal government have not ignored the crisis, but their efforts are a patchwork of ambition and inadequacy. Locally, the Office of Homeless Services has launched initiatives like a recent funding proposal, which funds emergency shelters for older adults, and another grant program offering grants to stabilize housing for those losing HUD-COC funding. The city's coordinated entry system, started in 2018, aims to streamline access to housing and services, but demand far outstrips supply. Shelters are often full, turning away families, and voucher wait lists stretch years. Nationally, HUD's Continuum of Care and Emergency Solutions grants provide billions for shelters and supportive services, but they fall short of the 200,000-bed national shortfall. The Biden administration's proposed FY 2025 budget, which included $32.8 billion for housing vouchers and $258 billion for 2 million affordable homes, was largely stalled, and the Trump administration's 2025 priorities signal a shift toward enforcement over prevention. These policies have strengths, but glaring weaknesses. Housing First programs, like Philadelphia's Project Home, prove effective. 9 out of 10 participants remain housed after a year, but funding is limited, and only a fraction of those in need benefit. Criminalization policies, like encampment bans supported by the 2024 Supreme Court ruling, displace rather than solve, costing cities millions while pushing people into more dangerous situations. Federal cuts to programs like LIHEAP threaten to increase evictions by leaving families unable to afford utility. In Philadelphia, a sanctuary city, immigration policies exacerbate the crisis, as undocumented individuals avoid services for fear of deportation, increasing their risk of homelessness. The disconnect is stark. Policies exist, but they're underfunded, misdirected, or punitive. The homeless in America deserve more than temporary fixes. They need a system that prioritizes housing as a right, not a privilege. Could this be evidence of a series of failed policies? Government actions, band-aids on a broken system. Government efforts, both local and federal, reflect a mix of good intentions and systemic failures. Philadelphia's OHS works tirelessly to expand shelters and coordinate services, but its budget is stretched thin and capacity lags behind need. Nationally, HUD's focus on veteran homelessness has yielded results, an 8% drop in 2024. But other groups, like families and older adults, saw sharp increases. The Trump administration's 2025 policies, including support for encampment bans and redirecting funds to mandatory addiction treatment or institutionalization, have sparked fierce debate. Supporters argue these measures restore public order, but critics counter that they criminalize poverty, pushing the homeless further into the shadows without addressing root causes like housing shortages or mental health access. Effectiveness is limited. Housing First works when funded, but the national bed shortfall and rising rents undermine progress. Criminalization policies are costly and counterproductive, while proposed cuts to LIHEAP and mental health programs threaten to worsen evictions and overdoses. Bipartisan failures, from Reagan's housing cuts in the 1980s to Clinton's welfare reforms in the 1990s, reveal a lack of political will to treat housing as a human right. The homeless in America are caught in a cycle of neglect, where policies treat symptoms rather than causes. Annual spending tells a troubling story. In 2023, HUD and other agencies allocated roughly $10 billion to homelessness programs, a fraction of the need given the 7 million unit affordable housing shortage. Philadelphia's OHS budget, while not fully disclosed for 2025, struggles to meet demand. Too often, funds go to temporary shelters or enforcement rather than permanent housing or prevention. If billions are spent, why do encampments still dot Kensington streets? The real issue is misallocation and lack of scale. Money flows to Band-Aids, not cures. What would it look like to invest in homes instead of handcuffs? What would be the right path to finally put an end to this heartbreaking crisis once and for all? To end homelessness in Philadelphia, we must move beyond stopgaps to transformative change. The government must lead with bold, coordinated action. First, to increase the housing supply, HUD's proposed 2 million affordable homes through tax credits and zoning reforms could close the gap. Philadelphia needs local investment in low-income housing, streamlining construction to cut costs. Housing First, proven to keep 9 out of 10 people housed, should be scaled up, costing less per person than encampment sweeps. Strengthening the safety net, restoring LIHEAP, expanding mental health services, and raising the minimum wage to match living costs is critical to prevent evictions. Society has a role too. Nonprofits like Project Home can lead prevention efforts, but they need more funding and public support. Campaigns to destigmatize homelessness and advocate for housing as a right can shift public perception. Addressing systemic inequities, racism, discrimination in employment and housing requires dismantling barriers that disproportionately harm Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ communities. A comprehensive approach, blending prevention, immediate response, and long-term solutions is the only way forward. The homeless in America deserve a system that catches them before they fall, not one that punishes them for falling. Homelessness in Philadelphia is a mirror reflecting a society that prioritizes profit over people, where housing is a commodity, not a right. It exposes a legacy of neglect, from redlining to modern-day budget cuts, that has left entire communities behind. The 771,480 homeless in America, including Philadelphia's 5,500 to 6,000, are not a monolith, but individuals with stories. A mother evicted after a rent hike, a veteran battling untreated PTSD, a worker laid off after a factory closure. This crisis is a warning that anyone, rich or poor, can be one crisis away from the streets. It's a moral failing, a call to rethink what we value as a society. This is not just Philadelphia's story, it's America's. The growing epidemic of homelessness, spreading from urban cores to suburbs, from the poor to the middle class, demands action. We must demand investment in housing, healthcare, and opportunity, rejecting policies that criminalize survival. Share your thoughts. How can we break the chains of homelessness? Support organizations like Project Home, advocate for systemic change, and refuse to look away. Every number is a human life. Let's act before the crisis engulfs us all. What kind of society do we want to be?